You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Step into the digital upside down with Cyber Things, Armis's new 3-part podcast series, which will dive into the unseen world of cybersecurity. From real-life hacks to the digital shadows of the dark web, we connect pop culture and protection, fear and control. Episode 1 drops soon, so look out for Cyber Things in partnership with CyberWire.
From phishing to ransomware, cyber threats are constant. But with NordLayer, your defense can be too. NordLayer brings together secure access and advanced threat protection in a single, seamless platform. It helps your team spot suspicious activity before it becomes a problem by blocking malicious links and scanning downloads in real time, preventing malware from reaching your network. It's quick to deploy, easy to scale, and built on zero-trust principles, so only the right people get access to the right resources. Get 28% off on a yearly plan at nordlayer.com/cyberwiredaily with code CyberWire-28. That's nordlayer.com/cyberwiredaily, code CyberWire-28. That's valid through December 10th, 2025. The Pentagon spends millions on AI hacking. The New York Times investigates illicit crypto funds. Researchers uncover widespread remote code execution flaws in AI inference engines. Police in India arrest CCTV hackers. Payroll Pirates use Google Ads to steal credentials and redirect salaries. A large-scale brand impersonation campaign delivers Gh0st RAT to Chinese-speaking users. A Bitcoin mining company CEO gets scammed. We got our Monday business brief on our Industry Voices segment with our Knowledge Partner SpecterOps. Chief Technology Officer Jared Atkinson is discussing attack path management. And Bitcoin bigwigs learn to bite through plastic. It's Monday, November 17th, 2025. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is your CyberWire Intel Briefing. Thanks for joining us here today. It's great, as always, to have you with us. Federal records show the U.S. is investing in AI-driven offensive cyber capabilities, awarding up to $12.6 million to a stealth Arlington startup called 20, which also secured Navy funding and backing from In-Q-Tel and major VCs. 20, staffed by former Cyber Command and intelligence veterans, focuses on automating operations that can strike hundreds of targets at once. Job listings indicate work on AI-powered attack tools, autonomous agent frameworks, and social engineering personas. The company's emergence reflects a broader shift toward automated cyber warfare, as other nations, including China, also use AI agents for hacking. While firms like Gh0st Technologies have developed AI to assist human operators, 20 appears positioned to push far more autonomous offensive capabilities. The crypto industry has gained mainstream momentum, bolstered by President Trump's new crypto business and his pledge to make the United States a global leader. But an international investigation by the New York Times, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and dozens of partner outlets found that more than $28 billion in illicit funds has flowed into major crypto exchanges over the past 2 years. Hackers, scammers, and criminal networks, including North Korean groups and global fraud rings, routinely moved money through top platforms such as Binance and OKX. Binance, which settled U.S. money laundering charges in 2023, continued receiving hundreds of millions tied to sanctioned entities and hacked funds. Exchanges have pledged to improve compliance. but investigators say law enforcement cannot keep up with the scale of abuse. Victims of scams, from individual investors to bank executives, rarely recover lost funds. Meanwhile, lightly regulated crypto-to-cash storefronts worldwide offer criminals an easy path to convert digital assets into untraceable money. Researchers at Oligo Security report a widespread set of remote code execution flaws impacting major AI inference engines from Meta, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and open-source projects such as vLLM and SGLang. The vulnerabilities, called ShadowMQ, stem from unsafe use of the Gh0MQ messaging library and Python's pickle deserialization. Multiple AI systems replicated the same insecure pattern through code reuse, exposing sensitive prompts, model weights, and customer data across internet-reachable servers. Additional vulnerabilities were found in vLLM, NVIDIA Tensor RT-LLM, Modular Max Server, Microsoft's Serif, and SGLang, with several projects still incompletely patched. Oligo says the issue shows how unsafe components propagate quickly through the AI ecosystem and urges immediate patching and strict limits on Gh0MQ exposure and pickle use. Police in India say hacked CCTV footage from a maternity hospital was sold on Telegram, exposing severe privacy and security gaps as cameras become widespread nationwide. Investigators uncovered a large cybercrime network that had breached at least 50,000 CCTV systems in hospitals, schools, offices, and private homes. Hackers exploited weak or default passwords, using brute force tools to access and sell sensitive videos for small payments, with some channels even offering live feeds. 8 people have been arrested, and videos were removed after police contacted YouTube and Telegram. Experts warn that poorly secured CCTV systems, often managed by untrained staff, leave Indians vulnerable to voyeurism, extortion, and data theft. Advocates urge stronger manufacturer safeguards, mandatory password changes, and better protections, especially in sensitive spaces. A financially motivated group known as the Payroll Pirates has been hijacking payroll systems, credit unions, retailers, and trading platforms across the U.S. since mid-2023 using malvertising. First identified by Checkpoint, the operation uses Google Ads to impersonate payroll portals, steal credentials, and redirect salaries. After going quiet in late 2023, the group resurfaced in mid-24 with upgraded kits capable of bypassing two-factor authentication through real-time Telegram interactions. Investigations by Malwarebytes, Silent Push, and Checkpoint showed the activity was part of a unified network, not shared tools, with at least 4 admins and indications of operators based in Ukraine. 2 main clusters run the operation: Google Ads with cloaking redirects, and Bing Ads using aged domains. The campaign remains active, highly adaptive, and difficult to disrupt. Palo Alto Network's Unit 42 reports 2 interconnected 2025 malware campaigns using large-scale brand impersonation to deliver Gh0st RAT variants to Chinese-speaking users. The first, Campaign Trio, ran February through March of this year, mimicked 3 popular apps such as i4 Tools and Udao, and used over 2,000 domains to distribute Trojanized installers from centralized infrastructure. The second, Campaign Chorus, began in May of this year, expanded to more than 40 impersonated applications, and adopted a far more evasive multi-stage infection chain, including cloud-hosted payload delivery, VB script droppers, and DLL sideloading through a signed executable. Both campaigns rely on mass automated domain generation, focus on software favored by Chinese-speaking users, and ultimately deploy Gh0st RAT for full system control. Palo Alto provides indicators of compromise in their research. The CEO of Bitcoin mining company SAS Mining, Kent Halliburton, was conned out of $220,000 in Bitcoin by fraudsters posing as representatives of a wealthy Monaco family office, Wired reports. The supposed investors courted him over lavish in-person meetings in Amsterdam, dangling a $4 million mining hardware deal tied to a side purchase of Bitcoin. They persuaded him to create a new atomic wallet on his phone and move funds into it to prove capacity for the transaction. Once the Bitcoin arrived, it was instantly drained and laundered through exchangers, mixers, and cross-chain bridges, making it difficult to trace or recover. Researchers believe the scammers captured his seed phrase, likely via discrete visual surveillance. The theft created a serious cash crunch for SAS mining, but the company ultimately remained solvent. Elsewhere, British prosecutors obtained a civil recovery order to seize £4.1 billion in crypto from Twitter hacker Joseph James O'Connor, reclaiming profits from the 2020 breach that hijacked celebrity accounts to push a Bitcoin scam. O'Connor, already serving 5 years in the U.S. for computer intrusions, fraud, and money laundering, helped run a SIM-swapping scheme that netted over $100,000. The order targets Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stablecoins and shows UK authorities can recover illicit assets even when convictions occur abroad. Turning to our Monday Biz Brief, cybersecurity funding and acquisitions surged last week, led by Israel's Tensai emerging from stealth with a $75 million seed round to build an AI agent-driven penetration testing platform. Sweet Security also raised $75 million to expand its runtime CNAPP and AI security offerings. Truffle Security secured $25 million to grow its secrets exposure detection tools, while identity-focused Oleria raised $19 million, and application security startup CISO raised $7 million. Threat detection firm Rylavera added $3 million in seed funding. The M&A front was equally active. Coalition acquired MDR provider WireSpeed. Arctic Wolf bought ransomware prevention firm Upsite. Morgan Franklin Cyber acquired Lynx Technology Partners. Hexaware purchased IAM provider CyberSolve. Axiom GRC acquired IS Partners. Archon bought cloud security firm ScaleSec. And Pantera acquired offensive security firm EVA Information Security to expand adversarial testing for AI-integrated environments. Be sure to check out our CyberWire Business Briefing, part of CyberWire Pro. You can find that on our website. And a programming note, join us for Cyber Things, Armis's special edition podcast series that pulls back the curtain on the eerie parallels between our real cyber landscape and a certain Hawkins-shaped sci-fi universe. Episode 1, The Unseen World, premieres today, revealing the hidden dangers lurking just beneath our digital surface on your favorite podcast app. Look for Cyber Things, tune into the trailer and Episode 1, and subscribe now, before the shadows start moving. We'll have a link in our show notes as well. Coming up after the break, Chief Technology Officer from SpecterOps, Jared Atkinson, discusses attack path management, and Bitcoin bigwigs learn to bite through plastic. Stay with us. At Thales, they know cybersecurity can be tough and you can't protect everything. But with Thales, you can secure what matters most. With Thales's industry-leading platforms, you can protect critical applications, data, and identities, anywhere and at scale with the highest ROI. That's why the most trusted brands and largest banks, retailers, and healthcare companies in the world rely on Thales to protect what matters most: applications, data, and identity. That's Thales. Thales. Learn more at thalesgroup.com/cyber. Ever wished you could rebuild your network from scratch to make it more secure, scalable, and simple? Meet Meter, the company reimagining enterprise networking from the ground up. Meter builds full-stack, zero-trust networks, including hardware, firmware, and software, all designed to work seamlessly together. The result? Fast, reliable, and secure connectivity without the constant patching, vendor juggling, or hidden costs. From wired and wireless to routing, switching, firewalls, DNS security, and VPN, every layer is integrated and continuously protected in one unified platform. And since it's delivered as one predictable monthly service, you skip the heavy capital costs and endless upgrade cycles. Meter even buys back your old infrastructure to make switching effortless. Transform complexity into simplicity and give your team time to focus on what really matters, helping your business and customers thrive. Learn more and book your demo at meter.com/cyberwire. That's METER.com/cyberwire. Jared Atkinson is Chief Technology Officer at our new N2K Knowledge Partner SpecterOps. On today's sponsored Industry Voices segment, we discuss attack path management, identities in transit.
So SpecterOps kind of comes out of a group of red teamers. And one of the things that we noticed over time was that as you're conducting an operation in a network environment, there was kind of this guess and check kind of approach to how you would do things. You would gain initial access at some kind of arbitrary starting point that would be derived from phishing, or maybe you have some sort of poison link that you make available and you gain access. And then you would have control over a user identity, whoever clicked on the phishing payload, for instance. And so in the process of doing that, we realized that if we collect all that information up front, we can build essentially Google Maps for the environment, which says, I have this origin or starting point. I want to go to this destination. That's whatever my objective is. Can you show me the different routes that are available to me? And then that's kind of like the guide. It's almost like MapQuest for the attacker. And those routes we call attack paths, right? So it says, okay, you need to laterally move to this computer. You need to dump the credentials and take control of this user account. And then you move to this next computer, so on and so forth. Now, the attack path management component of that is, if you could predict one route, then what would happen if we were to say, we don't know where you're going to start? Because the starting point, like I said, it comes through phishing and things, vulnerabilities, all that kind of stuff. Typically, it's going to be relatively arbitrary. But the destination is usually somewhat predictable. Or maybe even if the destination is not predictable, organizations can typically identify the things that they want to protect the most, right? So not everything's kind of created equal on the how much security should we put in that. And so what you can do is you can say, show me all of the attack paths, all of the routes from any arbitrary starting point to some destination that I define, right? And so you would say, show me all the attack paths to take over domain admins. And the attack path management component of that is, okay, now that we know all of the routes, what configurations are creating the most kind of risk for us? Where can we make configuration changes that reduce the number of routes that attackers have to take control of those more protected users or computers or relationships or resources?
Well, so help me understand, when we're talking about attack path management, why is identity such a central focus here?
Yeah, so kind of an interesting thing that fell out of all this is that the attacker is always operating in an identity context. And actually, the way that they traverse and gain access is they kind of context switch from identity to identity. So we typically use an Active Directory kind of like example, but this applies in Azure, in AWS, and all kinds of clouds, or even things like GitHub, these point solutions in the cloud. What we see is that when you phish a user, you typically will start in the context of two identities. You actually have two identities simultaneously. You have the user that clicked the phishing payload, right? That's John in accounting, for instance. And then you have the computer in which that phishing payload was clicked, right? And so you have these two identities. These identities are granted access to resources. Those may be computers. Those may be the ability to change the password of a different user. It may be the ability to add a user to a certain group membership, for instance. And what the attacker is doing is they're saying, does my current identity context have the ability to perform whatever action or have whatever action on objectives that I desire, so to speak? If not, is there another identity that I could take control of that would grant me the ability to get closer and closer to whatever my actual objective is. And so that's kind of like what they're doing constantly is trying to take control of different resources, which grant them access to other identities, which then grants them access to more and more resources. This is the type of attack is called the identity snowball attack. The interesting thing is that as I'm changing from one identity to the next, right, I'm taking control of some additional identity. It's not that I'm losing access to everything that I had control of previously. It's in addition to, it's an aggregation type attack to where I take control of new identities, these could be users, they could be computers, they could be service principals, it could be all kinds of different things, non-human identities, so on and so forth.
Well, I know you've said that attackers don't go through your tools, they go around them.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for us? What exactly does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. So this goes back to a little bit of the kind of red teaming background, right? So for those that might not be familiar, a red team is kind of simulating an attacker for an organization to help them understand kind of where their security controls work, where they might not do what they expect, that kind of thing. And one of the things that we notice is that from the attacker's perspective, there's often the organizations that we're working with, the defenders, the security team, they often have expectations of the tools that they put in place that are not calibrated to what those tools were actually built for. And what we find as red teamers is that account, once it's logged in, maybe I can't steal the password. And even if I do steal the password, it might rotate around. But when I log in as my administrative account, the attacker comes to my computer and they can steal my token, my Kerberos ticket, so on and so forth. And then they have control of that account, even if the password changes. We go around your tools, which is basically the tactics and techniques that the attackers are using are essentially changing based on the types of tools that are in the environment and how those tools actually function.
Well, help me understand here. So when we're talking about attack path management, how does that differ from traditional identity governance or things like least privilege?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So I'll start with the identity governance idea. So identity governance is super important. So there's this idea of lifecycle management, right? We need to make sure that when an employee leaves a company, we turn off all their accounts and we kind of get rid of those. We need to make sure that we're giving users the privileges that they need to do their job. One of the problems that we see between identity governance and attack path management is identity governance kind of has like a one-hop kind of view of things, right? So it's like you have Bob in finance, and Bob he needs access to some finance system to be able to write to a file share, for instance. Maybe Bob needs access to log into a computer, so on and so forth. So you're granting that access in a way to where it's only one hop. You're not looking at kind of what are the downstream consequences. I grant Bob access to a file share. What can Bob do with that access that maybe was unintended? What are the unintended consequences or externalities of that access? Attack path management is taking the current access landscape, so all of the permissions that have been granted, and then asking questions like, if I have access to this file share and then there's a file on that file share that has a password in it, that would allow me to compromise the user account or the identity that's associated with that password. And that gives me access to additional resources that maybe the administrator that was operating from the IGA or identity governance perspective might not have considered. That's the idea of the difference, right? What are the downstream consequences of I give you access to a computer? Well, there's other users that are logged into that computer. If I have administrative control of that computer, I can now steal those users' accounts and do whatever it is in the context of those alternate identities. Now, from the least privilege perspective, it's interesting. I actually did some research on least privilege relatively recently and went back and tried to find the first reference to the phrase least privilege that I could in the literature. And that actually came out in 1975. There was a white paper. So 50 years ago, somebody was talking about least privilege. And we're still struggling with it now. One of the things that I kind of make a joke about how we typically don't actually operate with least privilege. We operate with enough privilege, which is I identify that you need to do operation A, B, and C as part of your job. And I grant you permissions until I can validate that you can actually do A, B, and C. It's often very difficult for us to know in advance what permissions you actually need to do that. And so I kind of like just ratchet it up a little bit and give you more and more permissions. And what we find is that most organizations don't do that second part, which is validating that you can't do things that are unnecessary for you to do your job. And that's actually very difficult just by the nature of kind of what default permissions are and the granularity with which permission granting is available and things of that nature.
This is the whole you can't disprove a negative. Is
That's
that
right? That's right.
Right. Well, let's talk about risk. I mean, I've seen in some of your publications this phrase "visualize risk the way adversaries do." What does that mean?
Yeah, so we have a whole research team at SpecterOps where what we're doing is we're trying to identify what we call escalation primitives, right? And so this is where a real simple example that's fairly obvious, I would say, is if I have the ability to change a user's password, that means I have the ability to take control of that identity, right? And an attacker would look at it from the same perspective, right? And so what we're constantly doing is thinking about what are the ways that the different permissions that are being granted throughout the environment facilitate our ability to take control of additional identities and therefore access more and more resources. So we're thinking about it not necessarily as an administrator, which is how do I grant people access to do their job, but we're thinking about how does the access that's granted to people to do their job facilitate an attacker's ability, somebody that's acting in bad faith, to take control of additional resources that maybe were unintentional. And one of the things that we realized is that they were also using Active Directory as a input into Okta. So you create users in Active Directory, you set their passwords in Active Directory, and that is synchronized up with their Okta server. And so that means that if I get control of your user account in Active Directory, I have control of your user account in Okta. But because they were using Okta as a single sign-on identity provider for GitHub, that also meant that I have control of your GitHub account and access to read or write to any of the repositories, code repositories that you have that you would have access to in GitHub. There's this weird thing to where you might have a GitHub administrator who understands that Okta is feeding that through SSO, but what they don't understand is that Okta is dependent upon Active Directory, for instance. And so there's this we call it a security dependency downstream that the GitHub administrator is unaware of and therefore is not accounting for in their overarching kind of like security policy or security operations.
Well, how does it work? I mean, when we're talking about the mapping and the prioritizing of these attack paths, from a practical point of view, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we run into is in practice, large organizations will have hundreds of millions, if not billions, of attack paths to take over, say, Tier 0, which is this group that includes in Active Directory domain administrators, domain controllers, other highly privileged accounts. There's a number of different kind of assets that fit into that category. So if you have a billion attack paths, one of the interesting things is we do red teams, and what we kind of would find is that you would perform a red team, and what a red team is doing is they're traversing or taking advantage of 1, 2, maybe 3 attack paths during the course of the operation, and you report that out, and the organization that you're working with goes through and fixes those 3 attack paths. The problem is that there's a billion attack paths, and so you imagine that there's how many times you would have to conduct a red team and then do all the fixes before you would actually resolve those issues. And what we try to do is we try to say, hey, there's a billion attack paths. So there's a billion different routes for any user to get control of your Tier 0 assets, your domain controllers. But what are the individual permissions that kind of that everything funnels into? And so we say that there's certain configurations that are choke points or the major players in facilitating these attack paths. And so we direct your team or your identity management team to those specific configurations and say, hey, did you know that the authenticated users group, which represents every user in your Active Directory domain, has admin access to this computer? And did you know that a domain administrator is logging into that computer? That means that every single user in your environment has the ability to become a domain administrator because of that one configuration. And so then we kind of point you in that direction and say, these are the steps that you should take to remediate that configuration and therefore reduce that risk.
Well, when we're talking these kinds of numbers, things that are literally in the billions, I suspect there must be collaboration at play here. I mean, people have to. This isn't you can't silo these things. The teams have to be in good communications.
That's right. Yeah. So vulnerability management is a discipline that a lot of security organizations kind of have a good grasp of. There's kind of an organization structure that facilitates that program. We find that a lot of times this attack path management kind of falls into that same process where you need to have organizational visibility of who's responsible for what environment. This gets even more complicated when we start venturing out. We have a new capability called Bloodhound Open Graph, and what that allows you to do is expand the attack graph to account for different systems, things like GitHub, things like Snowflake, things like VMware vCenter, for instance. And this allows you to see these attack paths through all these different systems and how they're interconnected and that kind of thing. And so there needs to be kind of a central organization that understands attack path management, but then knows who they need to talk to direct these kind of like remediation steps too, right? Because the Active Directory administrators might not have access to make the changes in GitHub that are necessary to reduce the exposure of your code repository that's for your enterprise app, for instance.
Where do you suppose we're headed here? I mean, where is attack path management going in the future? What's the horizon look like?
Well, I think the thing that we are really interested in are what we call hybrid attack paths. So these are these attack paths that go across system boundaries, right? So the classic example would be this user synchronization from Active Directory to Microsoft Intra, for instance, to where if I compromise your Active Directory user, I now have control of a user in your Intra account. And sometimes we would see to where an unprivileged Active Directory user would be synced with a privileged Intra user. And so now there's this disconnect between the relationship there. What we're finding is that in these large organizations, the interconnectedness between these systems is tremendous. And so the interconnectedness is where all of this gets really interesting, because attackers, they could get access to GitHub, not have the ability to do the thing that they want to do, and then they could go back to Active Directory, move around within Active Directory to find a different user that has more privilege in the context of GitHub and go back up into GitHub. And so there's this ability to kind of like traverse through all these different systems, typically going back to whatever your system of record is, right? So that's a lot of times it's going to be Active Directory. But in other cases, maybe more modern environments, these Silicon Valley startups that have like a Mac-based environment, maybe they're using Jamf instead as kind of like their system of record, or Okta as their system of record. And so you're constantly trying to figure out, how do I get back to the system of record so that I can have more access to more users and then go back into the systems that actually hold the data. And then you kind of go from that perspective.
That's Jared Atkinson, Chief Technology Officer with our N2K Knowledge Partner SpecterOps. What's your 2 a.m. security worry? Is it, do I have the right controls in place? Maybe, are my vendors secure? Or the one that really keeps you up at night, how do I get out from under these old tools and manual processes? That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta automates the manual work so you can stop sweating over spreadsheets, chasing audit evidence, and filling out endless questionnaires. Their trust management platform continuously monitors your systems, centralizes your data, and simplifies your security at scale. And it fits right into your workflows, using AI to streamline evidence collection, flag risks, and keep your program audit ready, all the time. With Vanta, you get everything you need to move faster, scale confidently, and finally, get back to sleep. Get started at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber.
This episode is brought to you by Tic Tac. Your boss is going off at you for missing a deadline, and you swear the clock just moved backwards. Suddenly, you remember the pack of Tic Tacs on your desk. Now you're riding horseback on the beach, the smell of citrus in the air. And what's this? Your boss is sitting behind you, breathing heavenly fresh mint. Refresh your mouth and mind and share your good vibes with Tic Tac.
And finally, at a lakeside Bitcoin conference in Lugano, a handful of jittery investors ended their weekend not with price forecasts, but with a lesson in chewing through zip ties. Their instructor, former Royal Marine Pete Kale, assured them that teeth beat plastic, though it will bloody well hurt. Such is life in crypto's wrench attack era, where kidnappers no longer bother with elaborate hacks when a simple threat of violence does the trick. With Bitcoin's surge minting flashy nouveau riches, abductions have climbed to more than one a week, prompting entrepreneurs like Alina Vranovo to host €1,000 counter-kidnapping workshops, complete with grim PowerPoints and stern admonitions. No Lambos, no bragging, and beware beautiful strangers who find crypto bros irresistibly fascinating. Between tips on ditching obvious bodyguards and turning umbrellas into weapons, the trainers reminded attendees of one final truth: no digital fortune is worth a shattered clavicle, or worse. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. N2K's senior producer is Alice Carruth. Our CyberWire producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Eiben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.